Okay, last time we made a video talking about what Ted Kulfan said in this Red Wings article. At the time of recording this current video, that previous video is literally at almost 20,000 views, which is absolutely incredible. That doesn't really happen for my YouTube channel, and I'm not going to expect the same kind of output on this video because the previous one targeted two of the biggest fan bases in the league in the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs. This one is covering the Red Wings and the Blues, so I would not necessarily expect the same 20,000 view output, but, you know, maybe just a few hundreds would be nice as well. Get this to 300 views and I'll be very, very happy. But today we're talking about the Detroit Red Wings again, and bringing up this same article from Ted Kulfan on the Detroit News. Possible trade targets for the Red Wings who have the money to be buyers. This article goes over a few names from a few different teams, and in the previous video we discussed Kasperi, Kapanen, and Andreas Johnsson. I made my pitch for them, I talked about what Kulfan says here in the article, and we discussed why it would work out. However, there are a few other teams that are highlighted in this article, and the St. Louis Blues have two players whose names are listed that I think could be a very interesting discussion point here. If you weren't around for that Leafs video, then hey, let's just get you up to speed. This article is going over the Red Wings because they're a team with cap space. And the fact is, there are some other teams in the NHL that will be a lot more limited because a flat cap has been insinuated into the league. This makes teams who are up against the cap much more prone to making trading decisions that involve some of their better and more expensive players for the sake of trying to free up cap space. The Red Wings could take advantage of this because they have a lot of cap space, and if they wanted to try to speed up their rebuild by a year or two, a move like this where they sacrifice a prospect or a pick or two would not necessarily be the worst thing in my mind to occur. So let's go over why Jake Allen and Jaden Schwartz would potentially be good tradable pickups for Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings. Starting off with Jake Allen, a St. Louis Blues goaltender, the situation is the same in St. Louis as it is with the previous mention in the article. It just happens to be Pittsburgh, where the Blues have two goalies but appear to be leaning towards keeping Jordan Binnington. Allen, 29, will make $4.35 million next season, and then he becomes a UFA. Allen straightened out his game this season with 12 wins and 21 starts and a career-best .927 save percentage. Now that is absolutely nuts. The St. Louis Blues are a team that balanced their goaltending quite well between Binnington and Allen. Allen has been on the Blues for a very long time. He's been there full-time at least since 2014. But now, Jake Allen has dropped to a point where he's played only 24 games on the year. Jordan Binnington, on the other hand, played a whopping 50 games for the Blues this past season. He had a .912 save percentage and a .256 goals against, which indeed is worse than Allen's statistical profile with a .927 save percentage and a 2.15 goals against average, but you could tell just from the numbers, the way the Blues were carried in the playoffs last season by Binnington, who made his debut in the NHL with an incredible run, and who is 2 years younger, and who the Blues just seem to have more faith in going into the long term. So, Kulfan proposes that because the Blues would need the cap space to re-sign guys like Vince Dunn, to re-sign guys like Pietrangelo, etc., moving a guy like Jake Allen, who is making upwards of $4 million next season, could be seen as a positive move. Now, on the Red Wings' point of view, you could argue that a goalie isn't really their biggest need at the moment. Not because Jimmy Howard is good, in fact, he's really not good. But the fact is, Jonathan Bernier is a guy who was honestly pretty solid, and for a team that isn't really expected to win within the next few years, the need for acquiring a winning goaltender today does not really present itself as the most desirable nor the most actually appropriate for the context. But, you know, obviously you can never have enough good goalies, so the perspective to get a goalie just because getting a good goalie is better than not having a good goalie is valid as well. I just thought it would be a little bit more of a harder pitch to make, in my opinion at least. However, for the other guy on this list, Jaden Schwartz, things could be a lot more desirable, to the masses at least, in my opinion, because for Jaden Schwartz, Ted Kulfan writes this: "The Blues can't keep everyone, and Schwartz, who is 28, may be expendable. He signed for one more season at $5.35 million and bounced back with 22 goals and 57 points. Schwartz would supply a sorely needed threat on the wing. Now, Jaden Schwartz, to me, is one of the most underrated offensive forwards in the NHL. Back in 2017-2018, I remember I had him on my fantasy pool for the little thing that we were doing at school, and this guy was legitimately just under a point per game the entire season pretty much, and then he got wiped out by injuries and he missed a good chunk of the season, but he finished up that year with 59 points in 62 games. Before that, Schwartz established himself as a consistent 50-60 point pace winger in the NHL, and his poor year in 2018-19 appears to just be an anomaly in the good body of work that Schwartz has had to offer. This past season, he had 57 points in 71 games, which is a bounce back from the 36 he had in 69 games last year. However, I will say that 69 games should not be considered the be-all, end-all, because later in the playoffs, where the St. Louis Blues won the Cup, he had 20 points in 26 games, so obviously a clutch player when you need him. Jaden Schwartz, to me, is an all-round, good offensively tooled left-wing player. 5'10", 190 pounds, a guy who can win board battles, a guy who can make some good passes, a guy with a good shot, and a guy who does a very, very good amount of damage everywhere in the offensive zone. He's just a guy who works really, really hard out there. He's super tenacious, and because of that, his movement on the ice represents it very nicely. Because he's got a really good 1-2 step, and his acceleration is really, really nice to see. So it all combines for a very nice play-driving winger. And sure, he may not be a number one, franchise-defining Artemi Panarin-like winger in this league, but for a guy who costs just over $5 million a season, this is really a great pickup, and I love Jaden Schwartz's game as a whole. For the Red Wings, though, this is the kind of guy who, if you're able to lock him down long-term, because he is pretty young right now, Jaden Schwartz is only 28 years old, he's probably got another, 5, 6, 7 years of really good hockey still left within him. 7 maybe pushing it a little bit, maybe let's just say 4 or 5 to be safe. This is the kind of guy who, if you have him on your lineup, you speed up the rebuild by maybe a year or two. Because playing a guy like this alongside of Dylan Larkin can give a really, really good spark to that offensive core that didn't score too many goals this past season. Maybe have a Jaden Schwartz play alongside a Filip Zadina and show Zadina the ropes on what it's like being a very consistent top 6 caliber winger in the NHL. Now obviously, I'm a big fan of Jaden Schwartz, and you can probably tell that just from the way I've been talking about him, and I would love the idea of allowing him to actually bring his presence to a Red Wings team. But the same question comes up in this video's discussion than it did in the last video's discussion. Why would the Red Wings want to do this? Acquire good NHL pieces today for what would essentially be picks and prospects that would help the Blues save on cap space? Well, it's because the idea of building towards the future, not just in the long term, but in the short term as well, does present itself as something of value. You want to speed up this rebuild and you want to become competitive. You don't want to waste another extra 2-3 years being terrible. And adding players who can do well while also having the potential of contributing when Larkin is in his prime, when Zadina is in his prime, etc. These are the kinds of players who, in my mind, honestly are worth exploring. And since the Red Wings are a team that do have a lot of prospects and a lot of picks too, I would honestly be open to exploring the idea if any of the other teams would be willing to jump on board too. Jake Allen is the weird one here because I don't really know how strong the desperation is for a goalie, but at the same time, a guy like Allen is a legit NHL goaltender, and he has been for a long time. If you add this guy into the Red Wings roster, all of a sudden I think he's the best goalie in the system. Not to mention the fact that he could indeed contribute for the next 5, 6, 7 years too. Goaltenders usually have a longer shelf life than other NHL players who aren't goalies, so if Jake Allen is 34, 35 and he's still putting up NHL starter potential numbers, then I honestly wouldn't be too surprised. And in 5 years, Seider and whoever the Red Wings draft 4th overall, these guys are going to be mainstay players on the team. Zadina is going to be 25, Larkin is going to be in the end of his 20s. There's a lot of room for this team to be competitive in that timeline. So talk to me in the comments below what you think about Jaden Schwartz and Jake Allen. Should the Red Wings do it? Would you do it if you're the Red Wings? And if you would want to do this, what would you give up? Talk to me in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. So that's Trolls 99, and bye.